I want to have my traditional values. I want to be able to be a man. I want to be able to be masculine.
The voices of a new generation of conservatives.
They continue to vote Liberal. They continue to elect the socialist government that takes our money, makes our decisions for us, and ruins our country.
They're young, male, and frustrated.
We're at a moment where men and women are moving in opposite directions.
A trend happening in some of the world's biggest democracies.
CBS News exit polling finds that the president-elect won white men under 30 by 7 percentage points.
In Germany.
The far-right AfD is the winner among young men, while a large number of young women chose the left party.
And in South Korea.
The frustration and anger of young men in this country, whether their opinion is right or wrong, is palpable.
In Canada, young men are now an integral part of Pierre Poilievre's base.
The extent to which the coalition has changed, I think would be very shocking to people. It's very, very young.
Carney's not here for you. He's here to put Canada last.
Canadian politics has changed a lot in the last 4 years. Like, check this out.
In the 2021 federal election, polls suggested that about the same number of young men and young women voted for the Conservatives. But today, things are way different. That's an 18-point gap. And pollster David Coletto says that gap is growing.
Have you ever seen support this high for the Conservatives among young men?
Not in my career. It is a new phenomenon that we are seeing such a divide that the demographic most likely today to say they're going to vote Conservative in our polling are men under the age of 30. That is a complete change to at least what I'm going to say the last few decades of Canadian politics.
In the last 3 federal elections, voters under 30 were more likely to vote for either the Liberals or the NDP than for the Conservatives, which kind of fits with the stereotype of young people being more progressive. But around the time Pierre Poilievre became the Conservative leader, Gen Z men shifted their support to the party. Jeannie Roth was Poilievre's director of communications on his leadership campaign.
What's changed is as young people are increasingly unhappy with where they sit in the world because they don't own homes, because they haven't been able to start families, because they feel like when they take public transit it's unsafe. Increasingly those young voters are open to voting Conservative.
Boomers don't actually give a flying fudge about the future generations of Canada.
Adam Beattie is a conservative influencer from the Vancouver area. He posts under the name Robin Skies on TikTok, where he has nearly 180,000 followers. Beattie voted for the NDP in his first federal election in 2015, but he eventually turned to the Conservatives because he felt they were more responsive to the anxieties of young men.
Why do you think conservatism now is appealing to young men in a way that maybe it hadn't before?
Because we're on the front line of all the crap that's going on.
Beattie says he moved out of downtown Vancouver because it was too expensive and because he was assaulted.
But having like a crazed person who's clearly high on something attack me, call the police and have the police look at me and say, there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, that's a radicalizing experience. And the only people who are capable of living life without having to face that, frankly, are an older generation who live in, protected neighborhoods, who bought into those neighborhoods when those neighborhoods were inexpensive and who continue to be shielded from the reality that's going on that's being caused by these liberal policies and ideas.
We wanted to get a better understanding of when this gender gap began to emerge. So CBC News analyzed data from the Canadian Election Study, a comprehensive survey run by political scientists before and after elections.
The data suggests young men and women once had similar attitudes on questions about whether more should be done for women. But by 2015, their views began to diverge. The same goes for what should be done for racialized minorities. And recent polling by Abacus Data suggests that young men are more likely than young women to agree trans athletes should not be able to play on sports teams, and are more likely to believe there are no longer significant obstacles to women getting ahead. Coletto says young Canadians do agree on political and economic topics, like the importance of healthcare and childcare. It's on these cultural questions where young men lean conservative.
I think they do feel very anxious about the scale and the speed at which change is happening, particularly in societal kind of power structures, right? Like, it may be awkward to say, but I think they feel that their place in society is weakening and is maybe not as relevant as it used to be, right? That the historic advantage that particularly white men have had in our society is been challenged.
Alice Evans is studying how that rapid change has led to a global gender gap.
I think there is a risk that progressive activism has made some men feel alienated.
Evans says young people began polarizing along gender lines when they started spending less and less time socializing in person and more time on social media.
Globally, coupling is down, socializing is down, fertility is down. And that's a totally new dynamic whereby men and women are not necessarily understanding each other's perspectives. So people are spending much more time alone, by themselves, single, and then in these online networks.
Jobs are being taken.
The backlash to progressive politics has been stoked by online influencers known as the manosphere.
How long before we have an actual sex robot that can talk to you like that?
Probably not long.
It's a corner of the internet where figures like Joe Rogan host hours-long podcasts that are popular with young men.
All this ridiculous woke shit with these rigid ideas of what you have to say and not say. It's like, none of that is liberal. None of that is really like open-minded or progressive. It's all just it's a cult.
Men may gravitate to guys like Trump or Elon Musk who are saying, hey, the cavalry is here. We're going to cheer for the boys. We're going to champion men's rights. We're going to put men center stage for a change. Because that's an affirming message. So if men feel that they've always been left out and derided and neglected by these exclusionary progressive campaigns, then they may want their own heroes.
Fix my tire right on this screen.
Polyev often speaks in a language that resonates with young men.
This insane, woke, DEI obsession is driving people away.
Or like when he sits with Jordan Peterson.
Young people say, look, okay, I went through, I got an education, I work nonstop, and I have made the calculation that there is no mathematical path for me to own a house.
It's a strategy, I think, designed entirely to speak to that cohort, which is not a normal conservative audience. And so if Pierre Poilievre finds a way to get those young men out to vote, that's a constituency that could be decisive in him becoming prime minister.
Young men like Beatty.
The only reason why young people on the right are talking about all of this woke stuff is because people on the left are obsessed with it. They're constant, and it's like, I don't care. I want a job, I want a house, I want a family, I want safety.
Since Trump's return to the White House, public opinion in Canada has been in a state of extreme flux. So far, young men have stood by the Conservatives, but boomers have shifted their support back to the Liberals.
It's certainly true for any political leader trying to hold together a broad voting coalition that there are always going to be concerns about appealing to one component of that voting coalition over another. You know, Poilievre is talking about institutions being broken, and so if you feel defensive of institutions, which many older voters do, it's harder for that to resonate.
Don't get me wrong, Donald Trump's comments about 51st state and the tariffs, not good, okay? Huge L. But the idea that people, specifically of an older generation, might be willing to give a mandate to Mark Carney because essentially Donald Trump bruised their ego while their kids are struggling to pay rent and to buy a house and to afford the basics is frustrating, to say the least.